Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Touchdown Channel once again. Thanks so much for being here. With us today is Tom Billinge. Tom is currently in the country of Turkey, and I'm not sure where he's going to pop up next. I've been watching him on the map lately. He was just recently in the country of Georgia, and now he's in Turkey. He travels around researching martial arts and what I term as combat arts these days. May not be precisely the same thing, but that's a little more modern term for these sports, you might say, these
Yeah.
pursuits, these training regimens that military people went through. Tom is a writer and researcher about Indo-European military techniques and strategy for training, which help keep their troops sharp and on edge, ready for anything. Right, Tom?
Right. Yeah. My main focus is on unarmed fighting, and particularly
Hmm.
on what you said, like combat arts, but I would say combat sports, all of which derived from weapon arts originally. So, I mean, if you look at the ancient Greek styles or even modern boxing, it comes from Old English boxing,
Right.
which was derived from backsword fencing. So, I mean, everything does come from the arts of war and they become sports in themselves.
Yes, well, indeed, Tom, we call things arms, do we not? I mean, since I've been following you and some others similar to you, but not quite like, you're really one of a kind, I must say, Tom Billinge. Um,
Thank you. Yeah, no,
I'm,
I am, I am, as they would say, unique and beautiful snowflake, but not quite. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I'm thinking of, even rifles and pistols, right? We call them long arms. We call them small arms.
yeah,
We call certain, like a pike, sometimes it's called pole arms.
yeah. Whole arms.
These are
Yep, that's correct.
extensions of your arms, is the reason we're saying that, correct?
Right. And then if you haven't got them, you are unarmed. So, there
Right.
you go. Yeah. So yeah, and that's really where my focus lies is in the unarmed side of things. Um, I'm not a weapons expert, although I know some people who are, and they've been very useful to me in my research actually, because
Mhm.
it's helped me understand where certain elements of things come from, So being able to talk to those people is always very valuable to me.
Yes. And I know in some cases in the ancient world and perhaps today as well, but they would actually select a champion, right, from one side or the other, and they would perhaps lock in a single combat to decide what might have been a battle for
Correct,
within hundreds.
absolutely. That's actually so especially in the Iranian tradition, for example, in Iran they have something called a Zurkhane, which means a house of strength, and
Yeah.
it's where they train. And actually, it's performed in this area called a goad, which is kind of, for want of a better term, a pit. It's a lowered area of a circle, and actually that derives from when two armies would match their champions against each other. They'd fight in a pit, and the one that died would be buried in it. So that's actually the origin of that entire tradition. And the Greeks, all their combat sports come from what they called monomachia, which is single combat, one arm, single combat,
Right.
and it's champions fighting. There's actually recorded instances of it. One of the last ones was actually a battle between, I think it was the Arcadians and the Spartans, and that was in classical antiquity, which
Mhm.
is pretty late for that kind of thing, actually. And it was 100 Spartans versus 100 Achaeans, and the last man standing was the one that meant they were victorious or not.
Wow. When you talk
So they
when you
did it for the
talk
100 aside.
when you talk about things like this, I'm picturing a scene with the shield against the sun, and they're shining it in the other side's eyes, and all those kind of that
Well,
kind
do
of
you know,
thing.
it's interesting you say that because even in more sort of, let's say, modern but early modern combat sports, that was a very important factor because they were performed outside. So, when you were, for example, in bare knuckle boxing in the 18th and 19th centuries in Britain, they
Yep.
would they'd vie to be the one that's sort of with the sun behind their back because
Uh,
it would give them a distinct advantage. And actually, that probably continued on even into the sort of early 20th century when you see those fights with people like Jack Johnson. They were fighting outside. Jack Dempsey, there was all outside, they were all fights outside. So the sun does become a factor.
right. It's interesting to think that two men could literally save hundreds of lives or even thousands by a single combat taking place.
Right.
I mean,
That's correct.
even if they die there, they're going to be a legend or a hero. I'm thinking to the wives of the hundreds of men that are walking home now on two
Yeah.
feet because they did not need to fight a huge pitch battle that they may have.
Well, correct. I mean, the Japanese have a phrase which is it literally just says killing sword, life-giving sword, but it means the sword that kills is the sword that gives life. So, the
Hmm.
idea that one death could save hundreds or thousands is a very sort of prevalent concept.
Indeed. Indeed. And sometimes, at least in my thinking, it may not have been decided until the very last moment of a battle or not.
Right, correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And of course, the men have to be hopefully willing to do this and take part, right?
Right, and actually, I mean, so it's kind of interesting. So I'm currently researching about Roman material at the moment for my next phase of war yoga, and it's been kind of proven that most of the people in a battle, because a lot of them were actually conscripted or not particularly highly trained, particularly in the sort of later periods, that
Okay.
there would be a mass panic quite often, and a lot of people wouldn't know what to do and just would be kind of like cut down by the people who did know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea of the warrior class is. Like a warrior has to, a true warrior, which in the Indo-European tradition is actually in a class system. So there's a priestly class, a warrior class, and then an artisan class, and then everyone below them. And so that warrior class was often them and the priestly class were right at the top because the priestly class intervened with the divine. They could talk to the divine,
Yes.
which made them powerful. And then the warrior class, which is what we would traditionally call the aristocracy.
Mm.
The aristocracy, because it comes from the Greek word aristos, which means the best. Because they were the
Ah,
best in battle, they were the ones that actually had to put their life on the line. And so they would have to actually train psychologically. It's the concept for me of war yoga is that exactly that they have to go through various physical and spiritual exercises in order to be prepared for that kind of event, for
mhm.
battle, because you need to be to be effective in that situation, you'd have to be incredibly clear-minded, but also completely willing for death to come to you.
Right. Much different than someone who threw down the plow the other day and decided to take up the sword. You need someone that's professional if you want them to save your hide in this fight.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine, Ian Carmichael. He's also going to be at the No Fame Games. He's
Ah.
he's very good with weapons, weapons expert.
Hmm.
But we were talking about this in the concept that, most of the front line of a army in antiquity is made up of just, not necessarily with Romans or things like that, but if you saw a general army, let's say in Britain or in India or wherever,
Yes.
there'd be a lot of just these sort of farmers and craftsmen or whatever, whoever they've managed to put out there.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine this warrior from the warrior class just cutting into that front line, like larger than them, fed on the best food, on
Yeah.
enormous trained, just he could just take out like five or six of them before the rest of them even knew what was going on. So
Right.
I mean, you've got to imagine that kind of force, that just plowing into the front line.
Yeah, and just having a stake in the battle and having a goal in mind rather than just saying, "What the hell am I doing here today?"
Right.
That's a thing too.
Yeah, correct. Correct. I mean, it's one of those interesting things. I think it was at the Battle of Hastings. The English were the Anglo-Saxon English were completely taken basically by surprise by the Norman um, cavalry because the Anglo-Saxon British, they'd never fought on horseback.
Hmm.
They rode horses to the battlefield and got off them and fought as infantry. And
Yes.
suddenly they were confronted men riding horses with lances, just charging them down. So it's kind of an interesting idea, these sort of battle technologies, but also training and specifically a kind of class which is their entire life is aimed at just fighting, just like the Spartans, like the Spartans themselves was actually in Sparta, what we call Sparta, which is actually Laconia. Um, there was the Spartans of the warrior class. They're not all of the people. They're this small aristocracy at the top, and
Okay.
their only job was to fight. That was it. They had
Mhm.
no other, no other job. It was just to be a warrior. And so that's why they were so effective because they trained from the age of 7 until the age of 21, and then they went into the army. But all they did in that time was train to fight. So, and to fight together
Mhm.
specifically, which is what made them so kind of effective.
Yeah, they literally were a weapon.
They were, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a famous quote, actually. It's from Herodotus, and it's attributed to Demaratus, who was a Spartan king in exile. He got thrown out of Sparta, and he
Hmm.
had to, and where else could he go apart from to the court of Xerxes, the Persian king of kings? And because none of the Greeks would accept him, he's an exiled Spartan king, so he goes off to Xerxes' court, and Xerxes, of course, accepts enemy, former enemy kings. It's like, yeah, sure, come and give me the intelligence. And
Right.
so Demaratus is there at the Battle of Thermopylae, which is the famous 300 against the Persians.
Ah,
But
yes.
he's there with the Persians, and the Persian scout goes out to watch the Spartans to see what they're doing, and they're just there exercising and combing their hair and oiling themselves. And he comes back and says to Xerxes, you know what, this is what they're doing. And Xerxes is baffled. And Demaratus, the king, says to them, you have to be concerned. They're getting ready to die. They're preparing to die. That's what they're doing. And he then goes on to say that a Spartan one-on-one against any other warrior is the same, no better than any other warrior. But if you put them together, they're unbeatable. And they fear only one thing, and they fear it more than any of your subjects, Xerxes, fear you, and that's their law. And their law tells them only one thing, and that is to stand and fight and win or die. And so that's the power of the Spartans was the fact that they feared their law, and their law told them you win or you die. That's it. No retreat, no surrender, nothing else. That's your option. So that kind of
Right.
encapsulates that kind of elite warrior class and kind of it's
Right.
taken to its extreme, you know.
Right. Well, talk about your reputation preceding you. You may never have
Yeah.
to approach over the hill if you have the right reputation to do your fighting for you, perhaps.
Right. Well, Sparta famously until later antiquity had no city wall.
Ah,
Whereas all the other cities did because they just it was like it was a kind of
is that
what
right?
they would call flex these days. You know, it was just like, well, who's going to come, who's silly enough to try and attack us in our city?
Yep. Wow. Right. This is the thing we learn about in school from way, way back, right? All the like you said, from 7 to 21, they're
Yeah,
they're
right.
they're away from their families. They don't know
Yeah,
anything else.
no, that's it. That's it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff. Now, I know that a lot of this training you do involves perhaps not weapons, but certainly implements and equipment
Oh,
of,
yeah,
yep,
absolutely.
of a
And
very
those
wide
implements,
variety.
yeah, a great variety. So, I mean, I most of the strength training tools that I have put forward and used I've learned when I've gone to different places. So
Yeah.
at the foundation level, I have done a lot of Indian training, which is actually kind of where the war yoga moniker comes from ultimately.
Okay.
Um, and so the Indian system of exercises for it's actually for wrestlers.
Hmm.
It also ties into some kind of weapons arts, although that's kind of fallen by the wayside to some degree. But
Okay.
it's for Kushti wrestlers. And so Kushti wrestling is wrestling in the earth. Sometimes they call it mud wrestling, but that's kind of a misnomer.
Yeah.
Um, so they wrestle in the earth, but they use different tools, and their training system is called Vyayam. And Vyayam is a system which has body weight exercises, such as sort of things that are similar to push-ups and squats, but also maces and clubs in
Yes.
particular. There's other tools on the side, but big, heavy stone maces on a bamboo handle. That's called a gada.
Okay.
And then a mugda is a kind of wooden club, and if there's two of them, they're basically called jori, which means pair. And so they're swung. around there behind the back and round to the front, and it trains kind of throws and grips. It's really an excellent training modality for combat sports, particularly grappling.
Hmm.
So that's the Indian um, side. And then I also use the Iranian methodology, which is related to the Indian methodology. It's very not similar. It's similar, but it's different too. Um, in the sense, first of all, that the Indian one is done very much as an individual, whereas the Iranian one is done completely in time as though they are kind of a military unit in that sense, that they all do everything at
Okay.
the same time together. And they use wooden clubs and wooden shields and things like that, which they exercise with in the Zurkhane, which I mentioned
Mm.
before. So those implements that they all use are they derive from battlefield weapons and tools, but they end up becoming kind of oversized and then used for exercise purposes.
Yes. And balanced one in each arm. Commonly, I see a pair of them usually used.
Yeah. Yes, yes. In Iran, the most iconic tool is called a meal, and the
Mm.
meal are those sort of wooden clubs, and they're kind of they're larger at the end than they are at the handle end, and
Yep.
so they have a very lovely swing actually. They're meant to actually imitate using a shield and a mace in battle. So as you turn, all the movements are exactly, even the footwork is the same as you would use if you were trying to actually use a weapon in battle.
You're always attacking and blocking,
Yes,
attacking and blocking.
correct.
This is
Absolutely
that this
correct.
is that
Yes.
wind up I see you doing,
Yes.
preparing for that type of an effect.
Yes, exactly right. And then it became used, and so it became used by wrestlers because the last phase traditionally of the Iranian Zurkhane practice, and the sport is called Varzesh i Pahlavani, is the name of the sport. So the last phase of Varzesh is to wrestle, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside somewhat as the actual just the training up to the wrestling
Hmm.
has remained and
Yep.
become its own thing. They still do have wrestling, traditional wrestling, but they don't seem to do them together so much. Um, but exact that those tools became very much associated with wrestling, and for those exact reasons, grips and throws, the
Yep.
way your body moves, you know.
Right. Well, we'll see a lot of gripping and throwing at the Celtic Strength
Oh,
Championships
we
on
will.
June 13th, Tom, won't we?
Oh, we absolutely will. Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Scottish backhold wrestling, right? And
Yep,
Irish
Scottish
smaller than
backhole
elbow
wrestling.
wrestling,
Yep.
which about 6 months ago I would have said the Irish and what, huh? And I
Yeah.
had mixed them all up in because, but now I somewhat know what I'm talking about. I've been talking to four gentlemen, two from Ireland, one from
Yep.
actually Chicago, Illinois as well, five altogether, and two from
Yeah,
Scotland.
yeah.
We're going to be there as well. It's
Oh,
going to be a
yeah,
great
yeah.
time.
Yeah, so I mean, last year I was there with Ian, and we were sort of trying to do the back hold, but kind of
Okay.
without any without as much knowledge as the guys who are coming from Scotland, who are like championship level, like legends in the sport. So that's
Yes.
really exciting. I'm
Hmm.
super excited about that. And then yeah, Tom Higgins was there last year, so I spent lots of time with him, and
Good.
I did a bit of collar and elbow with him.
Oh,
But
nice.
it's good to see him and Nathan this year, so that's going to be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yep. Max Frayne and John Taylor coming over from Scotland
Yeah,
for the backhold
yeah.
championship and exhibition.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing those guys because I mean, I've talked to them both, in the past, and like this is the going to be a chance to kind of meet them and then see them in action and like learn from them. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, the most important things is to remain a perpetual student in that regard, and just always have that open mind for learning new things. So yeah, I'm really excited about the back hold because it's it's interesting how there's different so back holds a fixed grip style
Mhm.
and so's collar and elbow but with a jacket, and then you can actually draw parallels across the whole when in my research with the Indo-Europeans, but beyond that as well, of course.
Mhm.
Often these little things, there's jacket wrestling, there's belt wrestling, there's fixed grip without any kind of jacket wrestling, there's all these different sorts of wrestling, and then you can see how they've kind of gone into different areas, like for example, um, collar and elbow wrestling in Ireland, of course, but it's also kind of related to the jacket wrestling that was happening on in Great Britain. Obviously you've got Cornish wrestling, which is the
Yeah.
Celtic style in the south,
Yes.
and Guren wrestling in Brittany, which is also a jacket style, but those don't have fixed grips. And
Okay.
then Devonshire wrestling, which is like Cornish wrestling, except which also has non-fixed jacket grips. It's a jacket wrestling style, but you could also kick them, kick the shins, And then where the part of England that I come from, which is East Anglia, one of the counties of East Anglia is called Norfolk, and Norfolk also had a jacket wrestling style. So it's
Wow.
actually interesting. All over England, there were lots of different styles which disappeared completely off the face of the planet. So
Right.
either had what was called outplay wrestling, which is what collar and elbow is. So you're keeping them out. You're not going in for hugging. With
Meaning,
hug
meaning,
wrestling,
meaning strong arm. Well, not quite
yeah,
strong
yeah.
arm, but
Basically, outplay is when you're keeping them at arm's length and using your feet to try and maneuver them like that. And in
yeah.
play is when you actually can lock the body up and actually get in close and what they
Okay.
used to call hug wrestling. And that is what's interesting actually about Cornish wrestling. Again, like I said, a Celtic style in itself,
Yeah.
is that it is both an out and in style because it allows for
Really.
the kit and for the body grips. So it's kind of interesting to see that in the equation too. I went to Cornwall a couple of years ago and trained with the guys who are in the Cornish Wrestling Association, um, and Luke and Richard, and I'm going to see them again later this year, and I'm actually going to compete
Oh,
in a
nice.
Cornish wrestling tournament in Cornwall this year, so I'm very excited about that one.
Yeah, they're so very much alike and yet so different because I know that the Irish collar and elbow, if you back your hips up, back to the crowd and lean into the guy, no one's doing any tripping. They're not doing any leg
Right,
wrapping, which is the point of the whole thing. So you actually get penalized for strong
right.
arming or for keeping back.
Right, right. I mean, it's kind of like if you watch something like judo as well, it in any kind of jacket style in that regard, it's sort of seen as being a little bit sort of off to back your hips up that you should keep upright more that because it keeps the play alive, it keeps it going. Whereas if you stall and hold your hips back, it's just going to kill it off and
Yeah,
ultimately, people will lose interest.
sure. You're keeping him back or her back, then you're keeping yourself back by default.
Yeah,
Nothing's happening.
right.
Nothing's going on. It's a
Yeah,
standstill.
correct.
Right,
Correct.
right. But so when I hear the words like bare knuckle boxing, Tom, I'm thinking of somewhere down in the alley. You need to kind of pay the cops off to stay away for an hour or two. Is that anything right or not?
Well, I mean, sort of. So yeah, bare knuckle boxing was a very interesting art. It's still ex obviously there's a modern version of it, but the version that I'm interested in is essentially the Georgian and Regency versions in particular before the Victorian era. So
Okay.
1700s and early 1800s was the golden era, and it
Wow.
was always somewhat, well, the very earliest period, it was okay because it was this era of stage gladiators where they'd put up a stage and, people would kind of gamble on it and it was a big deal, like there was a famous few what they called amphitheaters in London. So where
Uh-huh.
someone like James Figg or Jack Broughton in the kind of early to mid 18th century had these arenas basically where the aristocracy would sponsor them and come. But then it
Hmm.
fell out of favor. It moved almost entirely outside, and prize fighting itself happened sort of on the kind of grey area of legality. It wasn't that bare knuckle boxing was illegal, but gathering in a huge crowd for something like that was kind of not allowed, but because there was no police force, it relied on local magistrates to enforce
Hmm.
these things. So they always had the fights between county lines. So they would be like, so they could just move, a
Yeah.
few hundred feet the other way and they were out of the magistrate's jurisdiction, So,
Wow.
uh, I mean, what's actually incredible is these barely legal fights attracted tens of thousands of people and it attracted them by word of mouth. And they would so imagine this, like so out of a population of about 8 million people in the UK at that time, you would get a crowd of 30,000 people turning up
My
to
goodness.
watch a fight.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing, right? They would walk mostly, maybe for a day or two,
Yeah.
uh, just to watch the fight, which could last anywhere between 10 minutes and 3.5 hours.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So I mean it was quite the spectacle, but the rules are very different. So modern boxing, you have rounds, you have gloves, of course, and you have time limits. None of those things existed then. So first of all, you were able to throw, trip, sweep, dump, whatever you wanted with your opponent. You could grapple standing up, basically. But once they hit the floor, that was the end of the round. And then you were given 30 seconds to get back to the scratch lines, which were these two lines in the middle. And if you failed to make it in that 30 seconds, the fight was over. But if you made it if both fighters made it to the scratch lines, the next round began. And so a round lasted until one person hit the ground, and there were no limit on the number of rounds. It was just go. So um, yeah, that was the bare knuckle boxing at that time, and so it was heavily gambled on. It
Yep.
was the first time in British history where the working class were raised to a status of heroism, that the
Mm.
aristocracy and the upper classes kind of looked up to them. They really valued
Yes.
these men. So it's actually a very important moment
Hmm.
in history in that regard, because it's the first working class sporting heroes. That before that, sports were sort of an aristocratic pursuit because they relied on you having free time and money, and
Yes.
um, you know
Yep.
right? And boxing, became, the aristocracy did train in boxing but only because they wanted to kind of show off a little bit with, and say, I'm learning with this great champion or whatever,
Yes.
it was a status for them. But boxing is the first sport where, you know, any of those people could participate, anybody, any working class man.
Yes.
Um, what a different breed they would have been. I mean, they were
Yes.
working from the age of 8, 15-hour days or 12-hour days, hard manual labor, and they all kind of came out of that background of being like, I mean, being sort of manual laborers,
Yep.
just there's the British, and there's like a few Irish champions too, who were very well regarded. Jack Langan, Dan Donnelly, these were like very famous names. If you go to Ireland today, there's still a place called Donnelly's Hollow where he fought against an English fighter, and he won, and they actually preserved his footsteps. They basically dug them out. And so
Yep.
up the hill are these footsteps, and they're called Donnelly's footsteps, Donnelly's Hollow, and there's a memorial to the fight there. So it's a
Yeah.
really big deal.
Yeah. This was a time when people were very much pigeonholed, were they not, Tom? I mean, you came
Yeah,
out of childhood, you might have had three or four choices. What you were just your
correct,
destination was predestination, you might call it.
correct. I mean, even to this day, to some degree in England, the class system is still kind of there. It's a bit vestigial at this point.
Yes,
Um,
of
but,
course.
but I mean, ultimately, because money doesn't change your class is determined by all sorts of other factors. So I'm middle class, for example. I'm lower, what you call lower middle class. But because my father went to university, but his father was working class, but he was a banker, and his father was working class, and he was a factory worker, and his father was working class. He was a pub landlord,
Mm.
so you can move up over several generations into somewhere, and it's not because of money, it's because of a sort of other kinds of status like education, or employment.
Yes.
But in those days, those were not really viable options for most people. That's why a lot of the old bare knuckle boxers, um, like for example, the very famous town for bare knuckle box producing bare knuckle boxers was Bristol, which was a town in the west of England,
Okay.
still there, is a town in the west of England, I say, rather than was a town.
Yeah.
Um, and it just produced these really tough men who had basically from childhood walked over to London to go and get jobs in London.
Yep.
Tom Cribb is the very famous champion of England, and he was a Bristol man, as they called him. And he, at the age of 8, just left home, walked to London, became a coal porter, and a coal porter is somebody who moves stuff from ships. They'd like the coal onto the furnaces. They'd move it on the docks, and
Yeah.
he was known as the Black Diamond because of that, because he was a coal porter. He was like the kind of
Interesting.
diamond that came out of the coal.
Right. Let me
Hey,
just,
thanks, Ray. That was great. I really enjoyed speaking to you.
yeah, thank you so much, Tom Billinge from Turkey today.
Yeah, I'm
Next
in
week
Turkey
or this afternoon, I'm
today.
not sure. I can't guarantee where he'll be again, my friends, except for June the 13th, Milford, Massachusetts, in the United States. I can guarantee where Tom will be that day, and myself
I
as
will
well.
be I will be there. And they should be there too.
That's right. Pheno Field. Go to nofamegames.com, everyone, and get your tickets there. Food trucks, mobile Irish pub, wrestling, boxing, lifting, pushing, pulling, all the Highland games.
Stick fighting.
Stick fighting. Thank you very much. Yep.
Yeah, it's going to
There's
be
so many things I
fantastic.
can never remember them, and that's fine with me.
It's going to be a completely like unique experience. It's going to be the first time that anything like this has been done.
Right.
So, I mean, they really do need to get down there because, it's just what a spectacle, what a chance to see some good things, to learn some good things, kind of history, culture, heritage, and
Right.
sports all together in one place.
All right. Well, thanks so much for detailing the ancient world of war yoga with us, Tom Billinge.
Thank you. My absolute pleasure.
All
See
righty.
you in.
All right. Stay safe. See you then.
See ya.